This presentation by Dr. Patrick McCullough from University of Georgia is part of the Spring 2021 Beef Cattle Production Series organized by Fort Valley State University, Dr. Niki Whitley and Stefan Price with AgriUnity, LLC, Mr. Handy Kennedy.
I've got a slide set prepared on weed control strategies for the spring, and I'm going to focus a little bit about what's new in the industry. We have some new herbicides that have been launched for pastures and hay fields, and we've got a few new active ingredients that are set to be registered here later this year. So some progress for getting some more tools in the toolbox to help manage problem weeds in pastures and hay fields in Georgia. So hopefully everybody managing grass pastures has been at least thinking about putting out a pre-emergence herbicide for annual grassy weed control here this spring. We've been using a product called Prowl H2O, pendimethalin, for the last 10 to 12 years, and it's been the only pre-emergent herbicide labeled for grass pastures, permanent grass pastures, for controlling annual weeds with pre-emergence applications. And we do have a new pre-emergent herbicide that was labeled recently for pastures and hay fields called Resilon. And what is unique about this new product is that it brings a new mode of action to the table for pre-emergent weed control in permanent grass pastures. This active ingredient is called indaziflam, and unlike Prowl, it's going to be labeled for just Bermuda grass and Bahia grass pastures only. Prowl we can use in cool season grasses, tall fescue, orchard grass, and well-established ryegrass in the spring. So this is going to be a warm season grass product only. We've been working on looking at pre-emergent programs with Resilon over the last several years, and also looking at the tolerance of pasture grasses to these applications. So a little bit about the active ingredient, indaziflam. What is unique about this is not only the mode of action, but the very low use rates that are actually applied in the field for preventative weed control. Most of the pre-emergent herbicides that we use for lawn care, for pastures, for roadsides, these are applied in pounds of active ingredient per acre. And indaziflam has very low use rates, and it's going out in ounces of product per acre. So very low use rates, fewer pounds on the ground, which is always a favorable consideration for environmentalists and getting new active ingredients registered for the industry. What we have seen is that Resilon is a very effective pre-emergent herbicide at labeled use rates for crabgrass control in Bermuda grass hay fields. You can see here just the weed pressure in some of these plots. This is Resilon at 3.5 ounces of product per acre, which is going to be the standard single application use rate of the product. Very good crabgrass control by mid-summertime, and usually by this point, growers start to be concerned for hay fields especially, is getting crabgrass controlled to acceptable levels once it reaches this growth stage. So, preventing the establishment of crabgrass certainly can keep us a step ahead of weed pressure that time of year. We have seen also very significant residual activity carry over into the following seasons. So if ryegrass is a desirable winter grazing grass, if you want to have ryegrass as a desirable species for temporary grazing in the winter and in the spring, there's going to be some carryover with this product. So I think it's a 10 to 12 month application interval before ryegrass can be established. This is not a bad thing if we're trying to keep ryegrass out of hay fields. Ryegrass is certainly a problematic weed, but if it's a desirable forage, using Resilon in the spring, March, April applications can carry over into the following winter. This picture was taken January 10th in a field that was treated on March 3rd, so pretty significant control. Some of the pasture tolerance work that we've seen with Resilon, we did some research in South Georgia with Dr. Tim Gray from the Tifton campus, where they evaluated just yields on Bermuda grass and also Bahia grass pastures treated with various rates of Resilon, single sequential applications, and also the overdose rates just to confirm safety. And basically what they saw there was no impact on Bermuda grass or Bahia grass yields relative to a weed-free, non-treated check plot. So we feel pretty comfortable with the safety of this product for hay fields, and no impact on the yields of those fields treated with that pre-emergent herbicide. We've also seen very effective control of problem weeds like field sandbur. Sandbur, sand spurs have a lot of concerns for us for grazed pastures. The seed heads have very thorny spikes on them, and it's a pretty difficult weed to control once it has established. We do have a few effective tools for managing sandburs, but once it has that seed head growth stage, it becomes almost impossible to control selectively with post-emergent herbicides. So what we studied last year was Resilon programs, comparing it to Prowl, H2O, and basically what we found was that one application of Resilon at the low and high rates there looked very good 20 weeks after the initial treatments in late August, about 85% control. But when we made a split application of the 3.5 ounces per acre and sprayed it twice, it helped us improve control to about 95%. So a little better control with 2 applications, but still single treatments were very effective for us for controlling sandbur. So with summer annual weed control, hopefully if you are going to be combating crabgrass, or if you've had issues with crabgrass or crowfoot grass, these can be very problematic species that can be very competitive with pasture grasses, especially in hay fields. So we are going to be recommending Resilon with a very similar approach to how we use Prowl H2O. Basically split applications can help extend residual control later into the fall, compared to just a single application of a single rate. So splitting that total rate into 2 treatments at half rates is what we have seen is most effective. So starting the initial pre-emergence treatments in late February or March. If our hay field come back after the first cutting, Resilon can be applied the same way, 6 ounces per acre total, split it 3 ounces or 4 followed by 2 late February, and then after the first cutting. For a grazed pasture, we can wait about 6 to 8 weeks for that second application, but getting the second application can just help extend residual control, and we get a fresh supply of that product on the ground to help carry the pre-emergent weed control later on into the late summer and fall. We have seen that Resilon also has post-emergence activity on weeds like plantain. This is interesting because it's not a post-emergent herbicide, but there are some problem weeds that are responding to the pre-emergence applications of this herbicide. So some of the cool season perennials like plantain can be very sensitive to that herbicide. And when we tank mix it with a 2,4-D or a Roundup or Milestone, using Resilon in the mix can help the control go from good to excellent and help improve the speed of control as well, which can be critical in the wintertime if we're having problems with weeds like plantain. We've done some greenhouse work looking at Resilon and the just the activity and control of plantain, and like we've seen in the field, there's definitely some susceptibility there to injury. It doesn't really kill plantain, but will shrink the plant down in the greenhouse and delay its growth. And this is important just because we are starting to see resistance in many weed populations throughout Georgia and really throughout the Southeast. in pastures, hay fields, and various other cropping systems. So 2,4-D, for example, we do have a lot of concerns about plantain resistance to 2,4-D, and also some of the other synthetic auxin chemistries, products like Remedy Ultra, Triclopyr, Milestone. These are all the similar modes of action, and all have potential to develop resistance if we have not been rotating our chemistries in our pastures. Here's just what a somewhat extreme case of plantain resistance to 2,4-D looks like. This is a tall fescue pasture in North Georgia where they have been using 2,4-D exclusively for 20 plus years. 2,4-D is very cheap, very broad spectrum, and they basically, like many end users, continue to use what was working for them in previous years, and did not change things up. And this is the level of weed infestation that we can basically create by not rotating chemistries and not practicing resistance management strategies. So 2,4-D failures in pastures, this is a concern for us for weed populations in tall fescue, ryegrass, and Bahia grass. Simply because we don't have other modes of action that are as selective that will not injure those grasses compared to 2,4-D and some of the synthetic auxin chemistries. So we do have other options in grasses like Bermuda, sulfonylureas, and some of the other post-emergent herbicides will be less injurious to that species compared to some of the cool season grasses. So resistance management is something that you need to have an appreciation for when possible, rotate chemistries. This is just a look at some of the synergistic activity of using 2,4-D with Resilon, the new pre-emergent herbicide. Dr. Tim Gray did this study in a pecan orchard there. Very good plantain control. So that's a problem weed that I think needs to be on our radar going forward. Just because of the concerns about resistance and how these populations can really create problems over time. Knotroot foxtail is a major invasive weed that's becoming problematic throughout the state in pastures and hay fields. It's also problematic on roadsides, especially the 15-foot swath off of the road where the DOT trucks are spraying their spray programs. They are controlling one weed, and they are releasing other weeds, such as this warm season perennial plant, Knotroot foxtail. This is a perennial that is spreading from below ground rhizomes, below ground stems. So this plant can be very invasive. It can certainly create significant problems where there's thinning, if there's not a very competitive stand of desirable pasture grasses there. Knotroot foxtail can become invasive. It can germinate from seed, and these plants do not die out in the fall. What happens is they go dormant, and they stay dormant in the soil from viable stems that will then regenerate new plants in the following spring. And these plants will continue to spread, create a system of rhizomes and stems that will help that plant outcompete pasture grasses over time. So many pastures in North Georgia especially are at the point where they need to be renovated because we have sort of lost the ability to control populations of Knotroot foxtail. But Prowl is generally not effective. Resilon, we have seen, is also not effective for preventing Knotroot foxtail from spreading. Really, the most important management technique is just early detection of this plant. Knotroot foxtail, if you see patches of this plant, you need to kill them out immediately. A Knotroot foxtail has a more compacted seed head than some of the other foxtails. And if you dig the plant out of the ground, it's got a very small rhizome, a knotty root, which is why it's called Knotroot foxtail. This plant is very difficult to manage. We've looked at various herbicide strategies in pastures, starting in the fall with Roundup and Roundup tank mixtures, Pastora, with and without Resilon in the following spring to see if we can prevent it from coming back. And you can see here what happens is we are controlling other weeds, and unfortunately, we are releasing knotroot foxtail in of our studies where we applied Roundup, or we applied Roundup followed by Resilon. We're actually increasing knotroot foxtail. So this is a very serious weed. We tend to be selecting for it with our current spray programs for annuals. As we are effective for controlling annual weeds, we are unfortunately releasing perennials like knotroot foxtail here. Just some shots of the below ground stems, below ground rhizomes of this invasive weed, which is going to be associated with its stress tolerance and recovery to damage from herbicides and also other stresses. We are currently working with graduate students on field research, trying to develop comprehensive management programs for foxtail control. This is just a look at one of our master students there on the Athens campus, Logan Dyer. He's basically dedicated 2 years of his life to researching knotroot foxtail control strategies. He's also looking at the ecology of this plant, looking at things like burial depth and seed establishment, and comparing rhizomes of knotroot foxtail and the effects of planting depth on the response to pre-emergent herbicides, and how that's going to influence the ability of that plant to escape and become a problem weed. So a lot of ecology work, just learning more about this species so that we can hopefully develop better recommendations on how to manage knotroot foxtail in pastures. Herbicide resistance continues to be a concern for us. We have been overusing many of the older chemistries like the Prowl H2Os, the 2,4-Ds, and unfortunately there are now getting reports of resistance to sulfonylurea herbicides in Johnson grass, which is a major invasive perennial weed for us in pastures. This was a report out of Alabama last year, which is one of the first reports, to my knowledge, of outrider sulfosulfuron resistance. This is one of the best chemistries for controlling Johnson grass, one of the most selective warm season grass pastures. And this is something that we will continue to monitor and look for alternatives. Once we have resistance to outrider, the next best option is more than likely going to be wick barring Roundup or spot treating non-selective herbicides to remove some of these infestations. But this is a concern because Johnson grass is a very invasive perennial, and it's going to be with us for many years because of its very extensive below ground rhizome system. So something to just have an appreciation for is if you see inconsistencies with your control strategies, that could be a sign that we have resistance to a herbicide that may have been overused over time. Very good example of resistance in pastures is with Italian ryegrass. This is a problematic winter weed for hayfields especially. Certainly is a good forage for temporary grazing in the winter, but for hayfields, ryegrass will shade out Bermuda grass and other pasture grasses in the spring. It will outcompete Bermuda grass during that transition period. And when ryegrass dies out in May and June, it can leave lots of voids that will open up those fields to the potential invasion of new weeds. With ryegrass, sulfonylureas, glyphosate, this is what resistance looks like. This is textbook herbicide resistance, where you have dead plants right next to green, actively growing healthy plants like they weren't even sprayed, because they have a natural mechanism that prevents that herbicide from causing lethal effects to those biotypes of that weed species. So getting herbicide resistance in ryegrass, this is kind of what it looks like. There's some sort of alteration where that herbicide binds properly most of the time, and no matter how much herbicide you put on the plant, you can put a 20 to 30x rate, it will not respond to that herbicide because it does not bind properly the way a susceptible biotype would once that product is taken into the plant. This is a concern for us with ryegrass especially. It is adapting to many management programs and becoming more problematic in Georgia. We have most of the herbicides that we use for cleaning up ryegrass for post-emergent control that are selective are from the Group 2 mode of action, which includes sulfonylurea herbicides like Pastora and metsulfuron. And this is kind of what we're seeing here. We spray a product like Pastora and we get that segregation of the biotypes, dead plants with green plants that are healthy and actively growing. What we have seen a lot of success with is tank mixing Pastora with Roundup in late wintertime. This is when ryegrass is most susceptible to this combination. Having Roundup in the mix at 12 to 16 ounces per acre can just bring a second mode of action into the mix. If there's any resistance to either one of those herbicides, you've got a second product in the tank that can help control any resistant biotypes. And having Roundup in the mix just will also help clean up other weeds that may be present in those fields in the winter. And because the grass is dormant and not growing, generally we don't see very significant delays in spring green up. And in fact, we can actually enhance that release of the underlying Bermuda grass as we take out that ryegrass that will outcompete the pasture during that spring transition period. So some new products that will be coming out hopefully later this year. Duracor, this is actually on the market from Corteva. This is a permanent grass pasture herbicide that will be replacing Grazon Next. Grazon Next is the 2,4-D plus aminopyrrolid. Duracor essentially is taking that 2,4-D out and putting in another new active ingredient with much lower drift potential and very good broadleaf weed control activity. And this is going to be as they phase out Grazon Next, Duracor will be the product that's going to be replacing it in that portfolio, and you'll be seeing that much more in some of the co-ops and the ag dealerships that are selling pre and post emergent herbicides for pastures and hay fields. This product will have haying, composting, and grazing restrictions. There's going to be very significant carryover, just like Grazon Next, just like Milestone and Grazon P plus D. So just make sure that you know what you're getting with Duracor. And if you have grazing or concerns about composting, you need to take a look at that label before using Duracor. Proclova is going to be another newer product that is set to be registered next year. The label was submitted, but there was a delay in 2020. This will also contain that new active ingredient with 2,4-D, and this will be a new tool for broadleaf weed control in clover and also Lespedeza pastures. This has been a concern because that we just have not had many products labeled for selective broadleaf weed control in clover, and controlling many broadleaf weeds can be very difficult when you're dealing with legumes. And Lespedeza also in those forages, we can get a lot of problems with perennial broadleaf weeds, and Proclova is going to be a product that will control many broadleaf species. It will cause some injury to clover, some injury to the Lespedeza, but well-established stands will bounce back after about 2 or 3 weeks after applications, and most of the susceptible broadleaf weeds will check out from those applications if they were timed correctly. So we're still learning more about some of these newer products, just to look at some of the testing that we're doing there on the Athens campus, looking at Proclova, comparing it to 2,4-D, and just sort of evaluating the efficacy for problem weed control and the tolerance of white clover to those applications. And here you can see we've got a very effective herbicide for controlling broadleaf weeds. Not doing much on crabgrass, which is not a problem for us, but you can see there we are controlling a lot of those broadleaf weeds in some of these trials where we are trying to evaluate and learn more about the efficacy of Proclova and some of the other new products. So with that, I will wrap things up and be happy to take any questions or comments that you may have. If anybody has any issues or local problems on weeds, I'll be happy to open the floor up to you.
Hi, this is Lamar Berry. I'm down in southeast Georgia. I been having a problem with the thistle weeds. I went to my local feeds and seed store, and first he recommended the 2,4-D, and I sprayed the 2,4-D with it, and it did nothing. So I went back to him, and he called a representative, and they recommended the Duracore. Can you speak to, and I just sprayed the Duracore today, but I sprayed it on a hayfield. I sprayed on one hayfield, about 20 acres. Can you speak to the haying and grazing restrictions?
Yeah, so there's going to be, I don't know the exact number of days for the restriction, but it's going to be for haying. I want to say it's going to be somewhere around 20 to 30 days. Double check that label though. Grazing, I don't think it's going to be nearly as long. I think you can get back in the field and graze pretty quickly, but just check the label. That will have some concerns about moving cattle or livestock that are grazing in that field. There will be residual that if you move that livestock to another field, they can be transferring some of that Duracore with them, in the manure. So that's all on the label. I would just become very familiar with that. If you like this product and you like the efficacy, that's something that you need to consider, what the plans are for the livestock and what your plans are for that field.
Okay. The other thing was as far as the haying, it says that on the label that do not sell any hay that was treated with that with this product. Is there a time restriction on that?
That's a great question. I don't have a good answer for you. That's one you're going to have to call the company and get their official number on the time after application, because it's not on the product label. That is something that's come up before, and that's one of the things that's either missing or they did not address on that product label. I think 10, 12 months out you should be okay, but you need to get that information from Corteva directly. Okay. And with the thistles, just real quick, what size thistle plant did you spray with the 2,4-D? Was it bolting at the flowering stage, or were the plants younger?
They're only about 3 inches. They're not bolting up yet, about 3 to 4 inches tall.
I think that if you made the applications around Thanksgiving, when thistles are very young at the rosette stage, they're going to be a lot easier to control that time of year than they will be in the late winter, early springtime. So maybe just trying to adjust your application timing with the products like 2,4-D, that can make a big difference in the efficacy and the return on that investment. And 2,4-D is a very cheap product, and if we can make that work for controlling problem weeds like thistle, that's something that making simple adjustments with the timings and possibly the rates of what you use could pay off for thistle control in the future.
All right, thank you, sir.
Yep.
Alfred Greenlee. What is the best thing you found for pigweed at this time?
So, what kind of pasture are you managing? Bermuda grass, Bahia grass?
Bermuda.
I would target pigweed control around late April, early May when it's young. And, if you could come in with something like a Duracore or a Milestone, something that's going to control pigweeds when they're small, but also give some pre-emergence control that's going to have some carryover, some residual in the soil, that would be very helpful in enhancing the preventative control of that pigweed if you've got some serious problems. If you've been using the same product year over year, I would encourage you to consider rotation. Products like metsulfuron or Cimarron, it's also sold as Escort and Patriot. Metsulfuron is a very cheap, very effective broadleaf herbicide that can also be effective for pigweeds, and $5 an acre for that chemistry is pretty good deal for all the weeds it controls. So yeah, there's a combination product called Crossbow. That's a 2,4-D triclopyr. It's basically Remedy plus 2,4-D. Weedmaster would also be a good one to throw into rotation. That's 2,4-D with dicamba. Those products are going to probably control what has established and give you maybe a few weeks of residual control. So I would think you may need to start thinking about coming back every 3 to 4 weeks if you start seeing those new seedlings, and making sequential applications to help get you just a more effective program, and get you through the summer a little bit better. But if you are managing a hayfield, or if you want to try and keep it as clean as possible, and you can use something that's got some residual in the soil, products like a Grazon Next or a P plus D, those will help extend residual control and help control those seedlings for a longer period.
All right, thank you.
Dr. McCullough, we have a couple of questions in the chat box. The first one is related to plant called rattlebox. I'm assuming they're talking about Florida betony or rattlesnake weed.
Yes.
And the question is, what can I spray on it to kill it, as well as bamboo?
Well, rattlesnake weed is going to be a lot easier than bamboo. If it's in a Bermuda grass pasture, I would recommend a 2,4-D plus metsulfuron combination. So a Cimarron, Cimarron Plus, that would be probably one of the best programs to go after rattlesnake weed. It's probably going to take 2 applications, but that would be a very cheap and cost-effective option for controlling it if it's really getting out of control. The problem with that weed is that it has the below-ground bulb that is going to stay viable in the summer, and will reemerge a new plant in the following winter. So getting something into that's going to translocate and move to that below-ground part of the plant, like a metsulfuron, that's going to be highly mobile once it's taken in, will help kill out that below ground tissues of that plant, so it doesn't come back in the following year. The bamboo, that's a very, very tough one. We actually have a bamboo expert that I usually forward those questions to on the Griffin campus, Dr. Mark Zarnata. He's the weed scientist in the horticulture department. He's an excellent weed scientist, and has some programs developed for bamboo control. But he has actually done some research that's shown if you can cut down the bamboo and then spray on top of that with Roundup combined with Arsenal, which is imazapyr. Arsenal is a very hot product that will help control the stems and will help control the below ground tissues on that bamboo to help get more complete control. It's going to be a multiple application program. He's also looked at injecting straight glyphosate into bamboo plants, and it has had some success doing that as well. But bamboo is a very, very problem weed, and it's very invasive. Can be extremely tough to control with any herbicide, but it's going to have to be something like a Roundup Arsenal combination for the chemical side, and then combine that with mechanical control, just getting that area cleared out, keeping it suppressed so that you can help wear down the energy supplies of the plant too at the same time. It's going to probably be a multi-year program if you have a severe problem with bamboo.
Another question relating to nightshade, and you can probably also throw in there horse nettle as well. What would be the best way and time of the year to control it in coastal pastures?
I would probably want to get nettles, the nightshades, controlled as early on, so that we can release that coastal and hopefully make it more competitive with weeds like horse nettle in the summertime. So spraying it in the spring with something like Grazon P plus D, Milestone, Surmount is also very good. Those are going to be some of the best chemistries for controlling those weeds. The problem is you may see some regrowth by late summertime. So spring is not the best time of year to be killing out a lot of these perennials. But if you can suppress the population in the spring and then come back in the fall, you'll have much better long-term kill of those weeds if you make a second application in the fall. So it's almost like a multi-season program if you have a serious problem with those weeds in your coastal.
Cotoran. The question was about being familiar with Cotoran.
I'm not familiar with that one. So
yeah, it's primarily used in as a cotton herbicide.
Yeah, it depends on the active ingredient. Maybe the active is found in another product with a different trade name.
I think it's a substitute of urea flumeteron.
Yeah, we don't have that in pastures and hay fields.
Another question came in regards to weed control in perennial peanut hay.
Okay.
Located in Southwest Georgia. A contact person for that with the UGA extension, more or less the extension agent in that county. And do you also anyone in the Tifton area, ABAC or the Coastal Plains Station? Is there someone that can help down there with?
Dr. Lisa Baxter on the Tifton campus can help you with some of the agronomic questions. If there's something you have a question about with cultural practices or establishment or best management practices, Dr. Lisa Baxter would be my contact at the UGA Tifton campus.
Dr. McCullough, can you talk to the group? Because I'm assuming there may be some folks that are not familiar that this publication is available. Talk a little bit about the Pest Management Handbook.
UGA publishes the Pest Control Recommendation Handbook every January. It's updated in the fall, and we add for every commodity that's covered in the state. For the most part, we have herbicides, fungicides, insecticides, nematicides labeled for every commodity for all the crops, and it is updated with control recommendations for problem pests, and we add tables and charts that will list some of the most common pests and the efficacy from field research with the active ingredients on how well you can expect those products to perform for controlling a certain pest for that crop. And we add new products to the pest control handbook every year. We also will remove some of the old products that may have been discontinued or no longer really relevant to the industry. So it's updated annually. It's published online, so you should be able to get a free copy of it in PDF format on the UGA extension publication website. And if you want a hard copy of it, it used to be published like a big telephone book every year, and they have since gone to publishing it as a spiral bound, ring bound handbook. So it's a little bit easier to navigate and a little bit easier to find what you're looking for with that new format. But you can, I think there's a $10-15 charge per copy if you want an actual hard copy of that pest control handbook.
Another question, Dr. McCullough. What broadleaf weeds or common broadleaf weeds in pastures will lend themselves to a weed management combination of chemical control and mechanical control? And I'm emphasizing on mowing. What weeds will generally tend to lower their populations over time with a combination of chemical and mechanical control?
I think most weeds will decline with properly timed mowing operations with chemical control programs. And if you can sort of overlay cultural practices on top of that, getting soil deficiencies corrected, balancing pH, giving the grass all the capabilities and the potential to grow to its full potential, then you can definitely reduce weed infestations over time with that sort of integrated management approach. What specific broadleaf weeds will decline with that strategy? I think a weed, for example, dog fennel. Dog fennel is a sort of a woody broadleaf weed, but dog fennel can be very difficult to manage. It grows up very tall and it can spread laterally and choke out grasses over time. So mowing down dog fennel can help deplete its energy reserves from those below ground stems that are trying to push carbohydrates to shoot production. So constantly mowing maybe once a month and timing post-emergent herbicides, say 2 or 3 weeks after that mowing operation, can help improve the efficacy of the chemical, but it can also help prevent the spread of that weed over time so that the pasture grasses have a chance to kind of outcompete the dog fennel infestations.
Noxious weeds to cattle in pasture situation. What are some in the Southeast that producers need to be careful with?
Well, one that comes to mind would be perilla mint. If that is consumed, it is so toxic it can kill cattle within 24 hours. So scouting your fields, looking for weeds, and getting the weeds identified is very important. If you see something that looks concerning and you don't know what it is, reach out to your extension agent, or reach out to somebody at the university, or someone who can point you in the right direction. I've got several books that make excellent references to just look up weeds. If you see a weed that you don't quite know the name of, or you want to learn more about it, Weeds of the South is a really good book that I use for pasture weed identification. It can help confirm the species that you're looking for, but it can also give you very important information that can be used to help manage that weed. For example, the life cycles. When can you expect that plant to emerge? What are the toxic properties of the plant? What time of year is it going to emerge and grow actively, and what times of year is it going to go dormant? There's a lot of good information in some of these books, and $40-50 investment into a publication like Weeds of the South can really pay off in the long run, if you are concerned about some of those types of noxious species.
Yes, hi. Any knowledge or thoughts on organic herbicides? Are you doing any research in that area?
Yes, so we've done a lot of work with natural products, organic herbicides, and comparing the efficacy to synthetic chemistries. And it's they are generally not as reliable, and they're not as selective as most of the other traditional chemistries that we use that are synthetic, in nature. So, for example, there's some organic products that are basically very high concentrations of iron, and you can definitely burn down weeds with it, but you're also going to potentially burn down desirable grasses and desirable species at the same time. So the poison is in the dose, and that's one way that some of these organic products work, is that you just sort of overdose the weed with whatever's in the product, but you may be also causing harm to some of the other plants that are growing nearby that may be considered desirable. But that's something that I certainly have an appreciation for. There's definitely a market and a consumer there that would like to have that option available, and those products are available. They can be used, but there's significant limitations to using the organic products that prevent us from really giving good recommendations with them, because they're just it's very hard to give a selective recommendation that's not going to be harmful to the desirable species that we're trying to manage too. And sometimes the control is not there. You'll burn back the weed a little bit and then it grows back, and then you got to spray it again. So generally those products are not as efficacious as the synthetic chemistries either.
We have another question in the chat, Dr. McCullough. Are there any phone apps to identify weeds?
There are phone apps. We have a phone application, or we had one called Turf Grass Management. It's more of a professional turf weed identification app, but we've got a website called GeorgiaPastureWeeds.com that's comes in a mobile format. So if you're on your phone, you'll get the mobile version of that website, so it may be easier to find some of the information that you're looking for. And there's some pretty good weed pictures, weed identification parts to that website that could be used in a mobile format if you're looking at that website on your phone.
Someone in the chat box mentioned that Google Lens, LENS, will identify most plants.
Yeah, those apps have come a long way, and there's some technology now where you can hold the plant up to the phone and it will recognize the shape and the pattern of the leaf, and it'll search and give you some options about what that plant might be.
Another question in relation to granular herbicides.
So one of the techniques that some of the companies have been doing to improve the use, or to help simplify the use of some of their products, is they will impregnate fertilizer with the herbicide. So one product that comes to mind is Milestone, which is aminopyrrolid, one of the active ingredients in Grazon Next, Duracor as well now. They are basically spraying on aminopyrrolid onto a fertilizer so that you can do a weed and feed. And because aminopyrrolid has root uptake, you don't have to just spray it onto the leaf tissue. It can also be absorbed by the roots of the weeds. It actually can provide good post-emergence control of many problem weeds. The problem is for pastures is that the spray liquid formulations, or the liquid applications, sprayable formulations, are much more effective. You get the product onto the leaf, it's taken in, and it's a much higher concentration that the plant is affected by, compared to putting it out to the soil and then hoping that the roots take up enough of it to do damage to the targeted weed species. So the weed and feeds are not quite as effective, but certainly that is an option to help simplify management so that you can put out that post-emergent herbicide with a fertilizer, and you can also have some flexibility with the fertilizer too, so you can spray it on a fertilizer that has a ratio that is appropriate for your pasture, and knock out two programs with one treatment.
Yes, this is Lamar Bear. I have one question. I see a new plant in my area, and I think it's called cudweed. And it looks similar to a dog tongue, and now it's starting to flower out, a yellow flower. What is there anything that you know of that's effective for that?
So cudweed is a biennial species, or it's a winter annual. So we usually don't see cudweed survive into the summertime, if this is cudweed. So you can either spray it out now, or you can let Mother Nature take it out in about 6 to 8 weeks. Usually it doesn't last far into June, and then by July we rarely see cudweed present. But if it's a problem and you want to spray it, definitely you can control it with a two-way mixture of a synthetic auxin herbicide like Weed Master, for example, 2,4-D plus dicamba. That would be a very good option if you're managing Bermuda grass or fescue or Bahia grass. You could also use a combination of like a Duracor that would probably control it fairly well, and 2,4-D plus triclopyr, Remedy Ultra, that would also be effective for it as well. So most of the other chemistries, if you're looking at a metsulfuron or the chlorsulfurons, the Cimarrons, those products are pretty inconsistent on cudweed. So you need to have the Group 4 mode of action synthetic auxin herbicides to get the best results.
Dr. McCullough, you have a sense of price per acre with those different products? What kind of money are we anticipating spending?
I think Resilon is going to be priced higher than Prowl, but I think it's going to be relatively affordable. That's certainly something that went into consideration for bringing a new product to the market. They don't want to price themselves so high that no one's going to buy it. So I want to say Resilon at the 3.5 ounce per acre rate is somewhere between $40 to $50 per acre. Whereas Prowl may be about $5 to $10 cheaper than that. So Duracor, I want to say, is also probably priced similar to Grazon Next. I don't have the recent prices on that available, so I hate to quote you the wrong price. And there's going to be some differences too in pricing depending on where you get it and how much you buy and what kind of deals may be going on with your vendors.
Yeah, Dr. McCullough, this is Paul Copeland. The fact that you explained just a few minutes ago about the weed and feed, that's what I do on my pastures and mostly hay fields and everything too. So we just put out application yesterday using Grazon, and I found in the last couple of years that the Grazon has killed everything from the dog fennel, thistle, sweet gum, persimmon trees, briars, and the likes. And for the entire year, I can cut for the entire year and not see any of that in my pastures. When I initially got part of my land there was a lot of growth of thistle there. So I immediately put the Grazon to work with a conventional sprayer and not putting it out with the fertilizer. And the Grazon plus Remedy, I mixed those two together. It will kill that root ball of the dog fennel. It will certainly kill the older thistle, and it will kill that blossom on the thistle. Whereas if they're blooming out, they won't spray it that much at all. Have you seen those type of things in action?
Yeah, so you spray Grazon Next with Remedy You just spiked it with
Yes.
Remedy. So that's a pretty hot mixture.
I also put surfactant in there as well.
Okay.
So I put that in there as well. So
that's a.
So I put that in, and I kill every bit of the dog film. It doesn't matter how tall it is or how small it is. It will kill that to the root.
Well, that's
and
great.
It won't come back.
That's great. And sometimes just dropping the bomb like that one time or in one season can whip that pasture in shape good enough where that grass is going to be more competitive and it's going to help reduce the reinfestations of those weeds in the following growing season. So sometimes if you just take one season and clean up part of your property or cleaning up some of those problem spots with some of those hot mixtures like Grazon plus Remedy, it's going to pay off for several years to come. So, congratulations.
It has. It actually has. And the only thing that I'm really concerned about that is if I put that out, how long do I keep my cattle off? Well, my vet and we talked about that, and he said, well, you don't have to keep them off no more than 3 to 5 days. Well, I usually do it 2 weeks or a week and a half or something like that, with pregnant cows as well as cows that are just out there grazing, I try to keep them off at least 2 weeks or more.
Yeah. You want to let the spray dry, get settled, but you also don't want the weeds to be trampled, and you want to give the weeds also time to sort of respond and try to resume active growth without traffic and without grazing or anything happening. So the more time you let the weeds sit with the herbicide, the better the kill is going to be too. So that's also something to consider when bringing the cattle back into the field.
Correct. Thank you.
Any more questions? If not, I'd like to thank Dr. McCullough for coming and thank everybody for participating.